Nigeria just made it 3-0. 3-0. 3-0. I don't know if that's going to sync or focus. But if you lot can see that, it is 3-0 to the Super Eagles. Turned off the TV because we got big business to talk. So there you have it. Ruben Amorim is no longer the coach of Manchester United. As you can see it here, Ruben Amorim has departed his role as the head coach of Manchester United. Ruben was appointed in November 2024, led the team to the UEFA, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Effectively, Ruben Amorim is no longer in that job. Now, there is a whole lot to unpack here. We can talk about the terrible time that Ruben Amorim had at the club. We can talk about INEOS and the kamikaze style of management that they've had so far. And then we can start to talk about Manchester United as a whole and where this sacking takes them moving forward. Now, with any decision made in life, and in sports in general, this decision has been a cause for celebration for many, but has also been a cause for reflection for many people, and even for some people, the minority, a reason to be dismayed, seeing that Ruben Amorim was probably going to be the next stage of what Manchester United wanted to be. But of course, some people do believe that this is just another cycle that Manchester United are in, where they hire a manager, they get excited, and then they sack them just when you feel like things are starting to click. Now, of course, I lie somewhere in the middle. I don't wholeheartedly believe Ruben Amorim was the right man, but I also don't believe that Ruben Amorim was everything wrong with the football club at this moment, which we will come on to talk about with the authorities at the club with INEOS. But I, as I said, lie somewhere in the middle. And this video is actually more interesting because it's more me asking you guys what you guys think and trying to gauge and understand what it is. But ultimately, I'm just going to come here with the facts and speak on those before maybe kind of delving into my opinion. Now, of course, when Ruben Amorim was appointed, I was one of the few people who actually thought it was a great appointment for the club. I thought the things he was doing at Sporting Lisbon, both in the Portuguese league as well as the Champions League, I thought Sporting looked like a very well set up side. I thought his three at the back formation, we've seen many managers stick with that formation, and we've seen a lot of success in Inzaghi, Glasner, Amorim at Sporting. But it was always going to be interesting to see whether that success would translate to a club like Manchester United, not just because of the difference in play or the difference in styles, but also the difference in expectation. Now, of course, we've seen Ruben Amorim has not really been able to live up to that. 15 wins, 13 draws, and I believe 19 losses in his time at the club, more losses than wins. That is never going to be something that's allowed to ride at Manchester United. It probably wouldn't even be allowed to ride at most clubs in the Premier League. But at Manchester United, he's been given a lot more time than people would expect. The terrible style of play, the boring football. To be very honest, I'm not even a Manchester United fan. I have a soft spot for Man United because growing up, they were probably like, if I had to have a team, a Premier League team, they were probably my Premier League team. But I watch Manchester United nowadays, and generally it's a chore. It's a chore watching them play. The style of play is not fun. The players don't look that good. They don't look inspired by the style of play. It feels like every time they concede a goal, all their confidence that they kind of mustered in the last few minutes or in the last few games goes completely out the window, and you start to see those bad habits kind of rise again in their game. The misuse of youngsters, the casting out of certain players like Rashford, Garnacho, Kobe Mainu. And I know Man United have kind of, I don't even want to say they found a bit of form in recent games because, of course, they haven't lost many games in their last few. And many people will throw the narrative that they're fourth in the league. But one thing people also need to understand is that the state in which the Premier League is in right now, and I feel like people say this every single year, where a team is only X amount of points away from top four, or a team is only X amount of points away from challenging for a Premier League, or so on and so forth. But one thing you need to understand is in these December, January, February periods of the season, the league is very condensed, and we've seen in recent years that the league has become more and more competitive. So it isn't ridiculous for Manchester United to be fifth position in the league. It isn't ridiculous for them to be not too far away from third position or fourth position. But at the same time, they are also 4 points away from 14th in the league, Newcastle, who I think if you asked anybody would objectively tell you have had a terrible season this year. So on one hand, there has been an improvement from last season under Ruben Amorim. But on the other hand, the only reason there has been improvements is because he took them down to the depths of 15th position last year. Now, of course, we can talk about how that 15th position was probably a sacrifice that had to be made to make that run in the Europa League that we saw. But I also feel as though when you do make that sort of sacrifice, you have to win that Europa League final. And it was the same thing that happened with Spurs. They made the sacrifice in the league. They essentially threw away the league and kind of sacrificed whatever it was that were their expectations going into the season in the Premier League to focus wholly on that Europa League final and that Europa League campaign. But as I said, if you are going to do that, you have to win that final. And Manchester United didn't win that final. They didn't play well. Ruben Amorim was still stuck in his ways. He was still stubborn about the system that he has. And you've seen the press conferences where he comes out and he mentions the Pope can never make him change his system. Now, whether you're Catholic or not, you understand the severity of that sort of quote. And Jim Ratcliffe has come out in the media and has backed him. The board seems to have backed him in recent months. In the summer, they gave him new players in Benjamin Sesko, Mateus Cunha, Brian Mbeumo. There has been money spent under Ruben Amorim. Now, I don't think the money has been spent wisely. I don't believe that the players that they signed were the players they needed the most. I think they definitely needed a midfielder more because Manuel Ugarte is masquerading as a footballer. I think they needed players in the wide areas, particularly in the wingback areas, especially when they knew that both Brian Mbeumo and Amad Diallo were going to leave halfway through the season. But within those inadequacies of the board, within those inadequacies of the recruitment team, you also had to look at Ruben Amorim because you knew those players were going away. The transfer window is over. You have the squad that you have. You have to make it work. And I think that's been the biggest criticism I have with him is, and a lot of young managers nowadays, where it feels as though they believe they have the divine rights just because they've been hired by that team, just because they've been hired by that board, to be pumped with money and resources to realize their style of play, their philosophy. And people always bring up Mikel Arteta, but people don't understand is that when Mikel Arteta was brought in at Arsenal, he had to show the people that he could be trusted with the resources that was going to be given to him and have ultimately been given to him. If you believe you are a good enough manager, you have to make it work with the players you have at the moment. I'm not saying you should challenge for a Premier League. I'm not saying you should challenge for a Champions League, but make it work for the time being. Be flexible, be resourceful, use what you have such that you can gain enough trust from the players, gain enough trust from the authorities, gain enough trust from the managements that, okay, this guy is doing something. You look at people like Hansi Flick at Barcelona. Barcelona don't have money, but Hansi Flick has showed us that if we do have money, you deserve to back this guy. The same with Xavi. Mikel Arteta likewise. But Manchester United, they didn't get a manager of that quality. And yet they still spent more money on him and there wasn't that much improvement. Of course, they've gone from 15th to 16th or 15th to 6th. But as I said before, the only reason they were 6th in the first place was because of Ruben Amorim. And ultimately for me, I've always been of the belief that Ruben Amorim deserves to be sacked. I believe that he is not good enough to be Manchester United manager. I think he should have been sacked after the Europa League final. I think he should have been sacked after the Grimsby game. But they kept chugging along with him, and it looked like the board still had trust in him. Jim Ratcliffe even went as far as to come out and say, we're not going to listen to the media, we're not going to listen to the noise, and we're going to give him 3 years in the job. 3 years. Those are big words. So for you to come out now, and for him to ultimately leave the club, and you look at the statements that they're saying here, with Manchester United sitting 6th in the Premier League, the club's leadership has reluctantly made the decision that it's the right time to make a change. This will give the team the best opportunity of the highest possible Premier League finish. Now, of course, with all these statements, we've seen in previous times, as I said, I've read many comunicado oficiales. I've read them. I can read between the lines. I know what these words, these vague expressions mean. This is not a sacking due to results. This is not a sacking due to results. And I think that's a bigger problem that needs to be discussed. Because, of course, we see the press conference that Ruben Amorim had a few days ago where he claims the board hasn't supported him. He is a manager, not the head coach. And he feels as though he should have a bigger saying in what's happening. There have been reports going around that perhaps the management and the hierarchy are putting pressure on him to change his system, to kind of be more flexible, which ultimately he should be doing regardless. I don't think those people in those positions should be telling him to do that. I don't think they have the right to do that. But he should be doing that anyway because Manchester United are not winning games. But fair enough, he's not doing that. So he feels as though those people shouldn't be giving him that sort of instructions because he's the person who's in charge of those things in the football club. So fair enough to him. But at the same time, I always say it in football, you only get what you pay for. You only get what you work for. You only get what you give. If you don't win games, how do you expect a board, a fan base, a group of players to support you? Ruben Amorim comes out, and this is one thing he's done fantastically well throughout his time. He comes out in press conference and speaks as though he's won multiple Champions Leagues. And fair enough to him. He has an incredible way of speaking. He's articulate. He knows how to handle the media. But when you've won absolutely nothing, and he comes out constantly as though the media is out to get him, he comes out constantly as though the fans are not being patient, you've not won enough games to come out and speak about suffering, to come out and speak about patience, to come out and speak about giving it time. You've lost to Spurs in the Europa League final. You lost to Grimsby in the first round of the Cup. You played 6 games in a row against 6 of the worst teams in the league and won only 1 game. That is not good enough for Manchester United. That is not good enough for most teams in the league. But as I said, on the other hand, I can also see where people are coming from who believe that this man should not be the scapegoat for what's going on at this club. And I don't think he is. I don't think he should be the scapegoat. And that's where you come onto the larger narrative at hand. Because for me, he hasn't been sacked because of the results. I think everybody can see that. Anybody who's nuanced enough to see the situation for what it is can see that he's not been sacked because of the results on the pitch. He's been sacked because of his words, because he questioned the authorities at the football club. He questioned the recruitment. He questioned the hierarchy. And it runs into a bigger narrative, not just in Manchester United, but in world football, especially with these American owners, where it feels as though they want football clubs to run like businesses. It's like now the football is not the priority anymore. Winning games is not the priority anymore. The finances is the priority. The checkbook is the priority. The balance sheets are the priority. It's no longer about whether we win trophies. It's no longer about whether you win titles. It's no longer about whether you compete. It's about having a yes man who listens to everything that the hierarchy says. And Ruben Amorim did not stand for that. Whether you believe Ruben Amorim is a good enough manager or not, I respect him for that. I have to respect him for that. Because you look at INEOS, ever since they came into this football club, and they were given a lot of free room, considering the people that were there before them. Now, I know they're minority shareholders, so the main owners, Glazers, are still present at Manchester United. But they were given a lot of free room because the people that preceded them were so bad. And yet somehow they've still managed to bring the expectations back down to earth, right back to where the Glazers had these people at. And I believe the way that these guys are running this football club, the lack of proper recruitment, the hiring and sacking of managers, because Erik ten Hag, he was sacked 6 months later than he should have been sacked. After the FA Cup match should have been when Erik ten Hag should have been sacked. That was the time for you to go into a new era, hire a new manager, have the whole summer to make that decision, give him an entire preseason to work with the players, bring in the players he needs, and start the cycle again. But they waited, and wrongfully so, because Erik ten Hag looked clueless in those first few months. And they spent another 200 million on players that he wanted. And ultimately players that have looked pretty lost under Ruben Amorim, a Joshua Zirkzee, a Nusar Mazraoui, who's only started to look pretty good recently. So for me, INEOS as well needs to take a lot of the blame for what is happening in Manchester United right now. And then that ties into a whole larger narrative that I wanted to speak about with Manchester United, and that is, where on earth do Man United go from here? Because as I started the video with, there is a huge divide between the fan base amidst this entire sacking of Ruben Amorim, amidst his entire tenure at this football club. And it's been divided into two teams. The first team being that Ruben Amorim is absolutely awful and has been one of the worst managers in their modern history and needs to be relieved of his duties immediately. And the fans who believe that sacking Ruben Amorim does not fix the job, sacking Ruben Amorim does not change anything, sacking Ruben Amorim just continues the cycle of doom that they've been going under ever since Sir Alex Ferguson left the club. Ruben Amorim has been objectively terrible as the manager of Manchester United. There is no sugarcoating that. But on the other hand, you look at those people who claim that it's just starting another cycle of doom. I feel as though the expectations of this football club have fallen drastically in these last 12 years. These fans complained under Erik ten Hag, a manager who won in the FA Cup, a manager who finished third in the league, a manager who took them back into the Champions League. Ultimately, they crashed down the group stage, but he took them back there. They complained under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, took them to a Champions League quarterfinal, got them second place in the league. Ultimately, got to, I believe it was 2 Europa League finals. They complained under Ralf Rangnick, who came out constantly and he put on blast everything that was going wrong at the football club. And now they complain about Amorim, a manager who, unlike those other managers, has no credit in the bank. But nobody can dispute that the same things that he's complaining about now are the same things that those previous managers complained about and future managers will complain about. Why is it that players that leave Manchester United go on to do bigger and better things? Why is it that the players who are seen as the bomb squad, the worst players that have ever played for the club, go to other leagues and actually start thriving? Now, I'm not saying that these players are good players. I'm not saying that these managers were the right managers. But the only constant that seems to be present is the football club, is the media surrounding the football club, the pundits surrounding the football club, the expectations surrounding the football club. I don't have an answer for what Manchester United might be. I don't have an opinion on what I think they might be. Because in this situation, Are Manchester United still the big club that we believe them to be? Can they ever be on track to be that big club that we know them to be from the 2010s, from the 2000s, from the late 90s? Will they ever get there again? Because those people who complain that Ruben Amorim has brought the expectation of this football club down to the very ground, they are right in an aspect. Because Manchester United should not be celebrating finishing in 15th. Manchester United should not be celebrating getting back to 6th position. Man United should not be celebrating 1 win, 1 loss, and not winning back-to-back games for over a year. But at the same time, Manchester United have had a whole host of players who have been seen as the saviors, the superstars that will bring Man United back to the pinnacle of football. And each and every single one of them has failed. Man United have had manager upon manager who has been seen as the manager that will take them back to the top of football. Managers who have had brief moments of real optimism that have ultimately failed likewise. So the question lies, who is at fault here? Some people might say it's the ownership. Some people might say it's the manager. Some people might say it's the players. But this is where I ask the question, who is at fault for the gross negligence that has taken place at this football club for the last 15 years? Is it the Glazers? Is it INEOS? Who is it? Because honestly, I have no idea. A football club that should be at the pinnacle of world football. And if we're being completely honest here, for the last 15, 20 years, they have done next to nothing. They have not challenged for a Premier League title. They have not gone to a Champions League final since 2011. They have not even remotely been a team that I look at in Manchester United. I look at every other major club in world football, from your Bayern Munichs to your Real Madrids to your Barcelonas, even Barcelona as bad as we've been for the last 10 years, to your Borussia Dortmunds, your Tottenham Hotspurs, your Chelseas, your Arsenals, your Cities, your Juventuses, your AC Milans, your Inter Milans. I look at every single one of these football clubs who Manchester United can make the firm argument that they are a better, bigger institution than. They're a bigger institution than every single one of those clubs, barring probably Real Madrid. And they've all had periods where I look at them and I say, this is one of the best teams in world football. This is one of the biggest and most competent sides in European football. I cannot say the same for Manchester United. I cannot say the same. So it prompts the question, where on earth do Man United go from here? Where on earth do Man United go from here? Of course, Darren Fletcher looks like he's going to take charge for the game against Burnley, as it says here. We'll take charge of the game against Burnley on Wednesday. Some reports are saying they're going to have him as the interim till the end of the season. Some are saying they're going to get another interim that's going to be there till the end of the season. But it looks as though they are going to find a full-time manager in the summer. So it looks like another season is going to go down the drain in Manchester United. And I think a lot of people would have told you sacking Amorim in the summer would have been the right decision. And I was one of those people. But ultimately, you can't change the past. So ultimately, what they have to do is fix the future and make sure that the future is bright. Because this is a football club that, if the right decisions are not made in the near future, we might see one of the biggest football clubs that we know turn into just another club. Of course, let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. As I said, I don't have a full, wholehearted opinion on this matter. I can definitely be swayed one way or the other. I'm more of the belief that Ruben Amorim deserved to be sacked. I do believe that. I believe he should have been sacked, and it was the right decision, perhaps for the wrong reason. And I think this football club, they really need to get things in order. But as I said, let me know all of that and a whole lot more in the comment section down below. Make sure you like, share, subscribe if you're interested in the content. And as always, take care of yourselves and goodbye.